Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about starting a relationship in the ashes of a previous relationship, creating language for your feelings by using an emotions wheel, and unpacking and living out your true desires in life. But before we dive into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
Ooh, I had two things that really fueled me up this last week. One was that I completed some training that I've been doing over the last month or so, and I've been doing it on the US time zone.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a battle for you.
Yeah, so I've been getting up at all weird hours of the night to do classes, and I finished. I got it done.
Yeah.
Yes, I finished all of the learning, submitted everything I needed to, and I just feel really proud of myself that amongst everything else that I've got going on, I managed to make that happen, because the opportunity to do that training doesn't come up very often, and it wasn't my ideal timing.
No, it wasn't. But you kind of ran with it and, took the opportunity, snapped it up when it was there. And
yeah, so that was a really good professional win. It's really just helped me formalize some skills that I guess already had. It was really nice to work through that and get it done. But the other thing that really fueled me up was that I had a really, really, really fun girls' night on Saturday night. One of my besties has just graduated from a psych degree after studying part-time for like 8 years. I think it's like the whole time that her and I have been friends, she's been doing this degree. So a group of us got together to celebrate and honor her and, just recognize achievements. And it was just so wonderful. We were a small group, and just looking around the room at all of these incredibly driven, ambitious, motivated women who are up to cool things. So it was really nice to put my friend in the spotlight and celebrate her.
yeah, how good.
Yeah, what about you, Nath? What fueled you up this last week?
Mine was that I had a weekend with close to zero plans and got a little bit of me time in there.
Oh, your introvert heart was thriving.
Oh, it has been, yeah. So, no, it was really great. So, yeah, while you were out with the girls, I was tinkering away in the garage and doing some tidying up and, fixing up a few bits and pieces and,
Be honest, you were playing with bikes, weren't you?
No, not too much. No, I wasn't actually. No, not this time. So, yeah, it was just really nice to not have anything to actually do on the weekend, nothing that I needed to get done, no commitments really. So it was just a really recharging weekend and, spent a bit of time at the beach on Sunday. It was really nice weather and, really, really nice. But now, here's this week's guest.
Today we've got Steph Wagner and Dalt Ahern joining us. Steph is an optimistic, emotionally in tune gal from Arizona living out her digital nomad dreams. Dalt has lived an eclectic series of lifestyles, from performing Shakespeare on large stages in New York City and Boston to working in the mental health field, and now being a digital nomad. Together they are currently living, working and playing in Chiang Mai, Thailand. Welcome to the show, you two.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
We are jazzed.
We are jazzed to talk to you because digital nomad life is in our future.
It is, yeah.
So we're excited to have a bit of a chat, but let's start with the relationship. How did the two of you meet, and how long have you been together?
I'll let you take that one.
Oh, what a romantic story. So we've been together for 4 years. In fact, our 4-year anniversary was this month. So a little pat on the back to us.
Amazing.
Yeah, man, how did we meet? Well, gosh, it's a romantic story that involves the wondrous app of Tinder. And after years of using that app and really floundering, I finally found the diamond in the rough, so to speak. And we probably exchanged Shakespearean-style messages for a week before I invited Steph to go salsa dancing with me.
Oh, you
and
really
my
broke
sister.
character.
Oh, yeah. That was our first date.
Amazing.
Yeah. And she showed up. She was undoubtedly the best dancer on the dance floor. And we really just kicked it off from there. So,
Yeah, the rest is history.
So were you both digital nomading when you met, or were you roots down in somewhere?
No, this is brand new for both of us. It had been a dream of mine forever, and then I convinced Dalton that this would be a good lifestyle choice. But he is from Connecticut originally. I'm from Arizona, so opposite sides of the United States. And we met in Arizona. He was out there with his family who had moved out there. And yeah, we met, and then we actually moved to Oregon together. We did buy a house there and we did the adult life for a hot second. And then we decided we should embark on this digital nomad journey together.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. And how long have you been on the road?
Only a month and a half total.
Still fresh. Awesome.
Yeah,
Still
cool.
fresh, yes.
So we know that you started your relationship kind of out of the ashes of like previous relationships. So can you give us a little rundown on how that kind of worked for you?
And were both of you heartbroken or just one of you?
oh man, I think we both had some cleaning up to do. My God, like where do we even begin with that? Because when Steph and I first met, we were going steady, man. I thought we were strong. And then there's this this hilarious story. Not so hilarious at the time, but now that we can reflect back on it, it's pretty dang funny. Steph, after like a month or two of dating, the girl ghosted me for 2 months. She went off to the state of Hawaii in pursuit of a Hawaiian hunk that she had met years ago before me, and that really wasn't settled, but I didn't know that. So I don't know, Steffi, if you want to...
Yeah, I had some cleaning up to do, we'll say that.
You went to an island, so there must have been quite a lot of cleaning up to do that you went in hot pursuit to a hot island.
It's true. It is true. I had this kind of fantasy type relationship that had been really on and off, more on in my head than in real life, but it had been going on for about 2.5 years with this guy I had met on Oahu when I was like 19. I thought I was in love with this guy. And when I met Dalton, this guy was still around very sporadically, but he was still very much in my head, in my heart. So I really needed to close that chapter before I felt like I could fully invest myself in a relationship with anyone. So yeah, we had been dating for about, I think it was 2 months before I realized it was actually something that could be a real thing. And I'm like, I need to go close that door in Hawaii once and for all so that I can fully try this thing out with Dalton. So I did. I closed the door.
Yeah.
So did you go to try and close the door, or did you go to see whether there was something there?
That's a great question, Nate.
Yeah. The door, she was like, I'm going to push on it and it's either going to open or close.
Yeah.
That is true. That's a really good question. I definitely was going to see what was there still. Yeah.
And so how did you recover from the poor dating etiquette of ghosting? Like what, you came back from Hawaii and you were like, oh man, now I got to pick up on this other thing door that I left open.
It wasn't cute and it wasn't a clean thing. It was very messy.
Oh, yeah.
And I felt a lot of guilt around putting Dalton through that. And I also was very confused. There were a lot of tears. There were a lot of conversations on the phone with my mom, with my girlfriends, just figuring out what the heck I wanted. And there was still part of me that was like clinging on to this fantasy of moving to Hawaii and being with this guy. But I had to really hear it from some people that were close to me, like my mom and friends, that were like, Stephanie, what are you doing? Like, you have this amazing man right in front of you. He really is into you. Why don't you try this out instead of living this like fantasy life that's probably never going to happen? The guy in Hawaii wasn't as into me as I was into him, which I had to kind of come to reality with. But it did take a little bit of
repair
for
with sure.
Dalton.
And I even remember, so Steph would not answer my calls, my texts, all 50 of them.
I was busy crying and figuring out what I was doing with my life.
And here I was contemplating like, okay, so what do I do here? Like, my life is a romantic movie, so I'm just going to show up at her house. I'm going to knock on her door and I'm going to confront this. She's going to jump into my arms and I'll carry her off into the sunset. I never did that. I just continued to call her and text her. And it wasn't until 2 months into not hearing anything from Steph that I had a bottle of wine, I drew a hot bath, and I just sent her one last desperation text. I'm like, you know what? I think this is over. And I just sent her a text and I was like, hey, where have you been? And I put my phone down, I slumped into the warm water, and then all of a sudden, ding, and I was like, that's probably my mom. And I picked my phone up and it was Steph's name. And we'll spare you all the details, but needless to say, we got back together and we did a lot of repair work around that. And here we are.
So, Steph, was there like this weird overlap of like healing a broken heart from your fantasy and then actually investing in what was right there with you?
Yes. I think it took another couple of months after Dalton and I started dating again for me to be fully okay with that situation ending and then really allowing myself to open up to Dalton, because I was like, this is a really beautiful thing that we have here. But it took me some time to open up to Dalton because, yeah, I still was dealing with the fact that I had this like weird fantasy going on in my head that wasn't really happening in reality. And I was worried about that happening again. I'm like, maybe this thing with Dalton is also just too good to be true. Maybe it's in my head. I was worried about me being more invested than he was, which in reality, I think it was the opposite. But I was going through a lot of confusion for sure for the next couple of months. And I actually remember the one night that everything kind of solidified. Like, yes, Dalton and I are a thing. It was February 2nd. I don't know why I remember that date. I have no idea. But it was just like a week after my birthday. And Dalton surprised me with this really beautiful date night out at this fancy Italian restaurant where there was the only gondola ride in Arizona that took us around this little lake. This Italian man like sang to us in Italian. He sang me happy birthday. And I was like, oh, this is so lovely.
Yeah. Steph always wanted to go to Italy. And I was like, man, well, right now that's kind of off the table. But if I can't go to Italy, I'm going to bring Italy to Steph.
Very romantic.
It was. Oh, and another really romantic part of that story is that how he told me we were going on this date was he left this beautiful dress, like in a nice wrapped up box on my doorstep when I was at work. And so I came home and there was I unwrapped this box. There was this beautiful dress and it said, like, wear this Saturday. We're going to Italy. And I'm like, what's going on? So once we went on that date, I'm like, okay, he is really into me. This is a good thing.
She thought I was a player.
Lean in.
She thought I was like a fuck boy at first, you know?
I did, because I had just kind of experienced that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like the echoing effects of this fantasy relationship very much trickled into ours and led to some trust things and whatnot. So
you did good.
Thank you.
It's really interesting to see like how people think that when you meet your person, it should all be sunshines and rainbows and it should all be really simple and easy and things like that. But it's so often not the case. And sometimes you do need to work through that shit that you've got in the background and you need to dig up some of the skeletons to actually work through and be fully present and be fully there for your partner. And,
and I think, Nate, like
Absolutely.
that honestly is more commonly the thing that goes on. I think that relationships and love is really romanticized through movies and media and things like that. But like Steph had her own stuff going on. I certainly had my own stuff going on. Like I had just moved to Arizona from New York City, rather. And I actually moved to Arizona to get out of the New York City life where I was performing because I really felt like that environment and the people I was meeting was really exacerbating these feelings of narcissism, to be honest, like narcissistic traits and my inability to connect with anybody on a really genuine, authentic, emotional level. And I felt like I was literally becoming like void of emotion. And to put it in plain terms, I was just becoming a dick. It was
That's
awful.
very self-aware of you. Did something happen that held up a mirror or?
Yeah. My God, throughout the entirety of my life, I had this pattern of destroying relationships where I would get really close with somebody, I think that would scare the shit out of me, and I would just cut the relationship. I mean, literally sever it in a second. Like someone would say, I love you. And the next day I would never see them again. I would avoid them, delete everything from them. And I was like, man, what's going on?
Oh, so Steph actually gave you some of your own medicine.
Yeah,
That's
she did.
what it sounds
She did.
like.
It was the first time I had ever gotten
Cha-ching.
ghosted. And I was like,
And you're like, whoa, this is awful. I can't believe I did this to all those people.
Exactly. It was the universe's way of humbling you.
yeah, no, it was a huge wake up call for me because in a way, yeah, it put that mirror to my face. And I was like, oh my God, I've been leaving this trail of destruction in my wake. And really long story consolidated into something shorter. If anyone ever asked me like why I'm with Steph and why I decided to do the emotional work necessary to be in this relationship, it's because Steph, one day after like 6 months of dating, again, I thought I was doing great. And she came to me one night and was like, hey, I really like you, but I'm just not getting enough from you in the emotional realm. And if you can't expand your emotional capabilities, this relationship has to end. And every single time that happened in my life, I just went, okay, well, fuck you, get out. And in that moment, like Steph and I still remember it so vividly. In that moment, I had the devil and the angel. The devil was huge and was like, she's asking you for so much. Just tell her to leave. What a selfish girl. And the angel was going, yeah, but Dalt, you've never done this in your life. Like, what would happen if you decided to lean into love and choose the path of joy and happiness? And there was just something about Steph and her vulnerability that I said to her, okay, I'm willing to do this and I'm going to suck it first. So please be patient with me, because even though I decided to lean into it, it doesn't mean I could do it the next day. You know what I mean? So we definitely had a lot of work to do on ourselves. I think for Steph, it was a lot of external stuff that needed to be closed off. And for me, it was a lot of internal work that needed to be done. So I know that was a lot for that one question, but yeah.
No, it's a great answer. And I'm really curious, like for both of you, like doing the work and leaning in and building that, I guess, that additional depth for emotional vulnerability and connection. Like what did that work actually look like? Did you go and get a coach? Did you see a therapist? Did you read a ton of personal development books? Like how did you do the work?
That's a great question. And no, we actually never went to any therapy or professional help, which looking back, I'm like, that probably would have been a really wonderful idea. Might have saved us both a lot of time.
Yeah, might have sped up the process a bit.
Yes, I think it would have. But it really, for us, it looked like the main thing that comes to mind is something that we now call couch conversations. And we practice them regularly. That's a hard word to say.
It's a tough one.
Regularly now. But yeah, at the beginning, like Dalt said, he wasn't the most emotionally available or emotionally in tune person. And I am so emotional, like to a fault. So there was this weird like yin yang thing happening. And what we found worked really well for us was sitting down on the couch, all technology away and turned off, looking at each other face to face and just saying, okay, what is going on with you right now? How can I serve you better? What do I need to work on? And then just bouncing that back and forth off of each other. And these conversations were never less than 2 hours long. And 99 out of 100 of them, I would be crying. And we would, at the end of this long, tumultuous conversation, we would both walk away with something that we needed to work on in the relationship.
And I do have to add to that because it was this weird thing where we didn't ever utilize a professional to help. But my dad, shout out to Papa, he is a psychologist. So
that's true. I guess we did have professional
we
help.
naturally had one incorporated into the family who would help us. I would bounce ideas off him. And at that time, I was also in the mental health field. So I was in this world that was constantly speaking the language. And I did that very intentionally because I went from a world of performing, acting on stage, to a world of mental health where I was like, man, I need to take a break. If I am going to pursue a life of fulfillment through love, I feel like I need to actually saturate myself in that world as opposed to just dipping my toes in it. And so I got a job in the mental health field. And so people were speaking that language all the time, and it helped me absorb it. And I remember one silly little thing that was like so good for us was there was something called an emotion wheel. So think about a Frisbee, and in the center of this Frisbee, there are some pretty broad words like anger or sad or anything like that. And then what branches off of those broad words are very specific words like frustrated or irritated or stuff like that, right? So obviously speaking is difficult, and speaking about your emotions is very difficult. So having this emotion wheel, we would sit down and I would go, okay, how am I actually feeling? And I would probably say, well, I feel angry. But for Steph, that could have meant so many things. So then a wheel would actually help me to identify, like, what am I actually feeling in this moment, which would then in turn help us to sort of remedy that situation or figure out exactly why I was feeling that way. And it was just such a better form of communication for us. And that's where we started, was just really getting better at talking, because talking is hard, man.
Yeah, especially if you don't already have that vocabulary. And I think it's so interesting that you said that was one of your early tools, because I think that was one of our very early tools too, of like, okay, learning, like most people can go, I feel happy, sad, fucked off. And like, that's kind of like the depth of very basic kind of language. And a lot of people can't even tell you why they feel happy, sad, or fucked off. But yeah, as you start to expand and go, okay, well, maybe what I'm actually experiencing is fear. And then, okay, well, like, what is it that what is that fear showing up as? Like, am I actually anxious? Am I unsafe in some way? And then getting a little bit deeper. Because I distinctly remember having a conversation with you, Nath, about something that had happened at work. And I was like, you were frustrated. I was like, okay, but what is it that's frustrating you other than like, oh, they're just annoying me? Like, let's dig a bit deeper. Like, what is that annoyance? Where did it come from? Why are you experiencing? What is it that's rubbed up against something that's created this? So I think, yeah, everybody go and have a look at that tool. There's a few different versions of it, but the premise is, it starts right in the middle and it expands out and then out again. One of my other favorite tools in this is called the Universe of Emotions. It's an app and it's set up like a galaxy, like the universe. And as you move around, it's kind of like in 4 different quadrants, and it kind of helps you map and go, okay, you might navigate to frustration. And then like, what are the other emotions that sit near frustration that might actually be closer to what you're truly feeling? But it's impossible to articulate if you don't have the vocab. So I think that's such a great place to start, is even just build the vocabulary to articulate, what is it that I'm feeling?
And you busted out that universe the other day. You got off a phone call and you were like, oh, I feel something. I don't know what it is though. And you were like, where do I start? All right, I'm going to go to this quadrant.
I like angry. I'm starting in the angry quadrant. Now let me navigate around that until I find something that,
Well, it's crazy because it like can change the narrative drastically, because for a while there was a portion of our relationship where Steph was sort of struggling with like jealousy issues.
Not sort of. I was really struggling with jealousy. I will admit that.
Struggling with jealousy. And from my perspective, when I think of the word jealousy, it came from a place of possessiveness. And that really...
And like neediness was the word he would use. I'm like, oh, I hate that word. No, I don't feel that. I don't feel like needy. I'm a very independent person. I'm like, that's not it. I'm like, no, that's not the right word to use.
Yeah.
So we used the wheel to finally, after it took us a while, but figure out that it was coming from a place of fear of losing something that was so important to me and feeling threatened by external things. So I'm like, it's not that I need more, it's that there's fear there. And then we got to dive into where that fear was coming from and how can we remedy it. But yeah, it was so helpful for that, just changing the language around what we were talking about.
Yeah,
it's sometimes interesting to work the opposite way as well. Like if you can kind of pinpoint the outside thing and then realize where that fits into your greater emotions, you can go, oh, well, that actually sits within this quadrant. That kind of makes sense with all of the other actions that I was doing around that.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, and it was funny because it changed my anger to a place of like, man, I really now understand how important I am to you. So it shifted the entire perspective and narrative with just a simple vocabulary change, right? So that was a big wake-up call for us to learn that we weren't the most effective communicators. And I feel like not a lot of people are, because no one's studying what word is synonymous to this, or it's like, yeah. So break out that dictionary.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to change direction a little bit and talk a little bit about what you called your like adulting sort of chapter and buying the house and doing that kind of thing. Like, did you do that because you thought that was what you were meant to do, or was that genuinely what you desired at that time?
Phew.
I'll start this one.
Yeah.
Definitely no, it was not what I felt like I was meant to do. And so I'll rewind it back. We were living in Arizona separately, and we had been dating for about 2 years, just visiting each other at each other's apartments and stuff. And we were really ready to move in together. But I had been living in Arizona my whole life, and I was very ready to leave Arizona and kind of branch out of my friend and family circle that I had been in forever. And Dalton had just moved to Arizona. He really liked it. And I'm like, shoot, this is not cohesive. But it just so happened that he got a really awesome job opportunity in the mental health field in Oregon. And I was like, perfect. This is a great way for both of us to get what we want. He gets a nice job opportunity and I get to leave Arizona. So we decided to just take the leap, move to Oregon and try it out. But the place we were moving to is a pretty small town, and it just happens that there's not a great rental market there. So we came across this like point where we're like, okay, do we just rent something kind of shitty, or do we buy a house and just really invest in doing this thing, like living together for the first time, me being out of state for the first time, away from everything that I grew up around, and really working on our relationship, and then Dalton getting to try out this mental health field thing. So we did buy a house, and that lasted for about 1.5 years before I realized I'm so bored.
So can you wrap some context? Because I think, a lot of our audience are Australian. So Portland, Oregon, like am I right that this is like the vegan capital of the world?
Oh, yes.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Or is that like some anecdote that I've picked up somewhere that's
No. If you
like
go,
it's really like hipster, artsy, vegan, like that's the place, right? Like it's a cool, trendy, young people kind of place to live, right?
Absolutely.
But we were not there. In fact, like Portland, Oregon is the most northern part of Oregon. We were in the boonies all the way in the south. So
Okay.
it was
Very
funny because
different vibe.
when we moved from Arizona to Oregon, the drive was 17 hours, but only 20 minutes of that was in Oregon.
Yeah, okay.
So like right on the border
Right
of
on the border.
California. Yeah.
So it's pretty brave that you were like, all right, we're going to move states, and in the process, we're going to buy a house somewhere that we've never lived before.
Yeah. It was kind of a crazy decision, honestly, but everything was just aligning, and it made sense to do it at the time. It just felt like, oh yeah, this is the right next step. We found a really awesome house that we both loved. It's a 1917 house, like super old, cute, whimsical style house. So I fell in love with that. And it happened to be in a really great price range. So it just kind of happened. It wasn't like this big, long discussion of like, we should buy a house together. It just happened.
It was like the natural progression of our relationship. We both literally felt almost no anxiety about it. So it was interesting. But like for me too, like I had said, I had just came from New York while I was living this actor lifestyle where you're jumping from job to job to job and quitting this job so you can go perform and jumping from this state to that state. So it's really kind of nuts. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't really want to go and do that again. I'm getting a little older. I'm getting a little more tired. So what's the next lifestyle choice for me? And I saw everybody, mostly everybody. They're like, try the corporate thing. It's super stable, 9 to 5, steady paycheck, benefits. I was like, cool, man. Cool. That sounds like safe. So I did. And coming from an actor lifestyle, I fell in love with it for like the first 6 months. I knew where my paycheck was coming from. I knew how much I was getting. I was like, this is dope. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And then, like Steph said, 6 months to a year after living in this house, we really actually learned something about our relationship that we can get into. But the repetitive 9 to 5, go to the gym, have dinner, take a shower, and watch Netflix Monday through Friday was actually having, I think, a negative effect on our relationship. And that's what we sort of figured out.
So, Steph, what were you doing at that time? Dalt said he was working in mental health space. What were you doing?
Well, I had a couple of different jobs throughout this time. This was a very loose period in my job, in the job field for me. I was working as a yoga instructor when we first got to Oregon, and then that was during the time of COVID. So then that got shut down. So then I switched to an online job working for a medical company, which was terribly boring. So there was like a bunch of different jobs in there, but I was working the whole time, but sporadically.
Yeah, all online too.
All online. Yeah. So it was this weird thing. Like Dalton would leave for work Monday through Friday, and then I would just be at home by myself. We didn't really make a ton of friends in Oregon because we lived in this small town. So I was working online, and I'm like, wow, this lifestyle is really not conducive with the happiest version of myself.
Yeah. And just a heads up too, like Steph was 23 at the time. I was 26. So we felt like we were pretty young to be living this particular lifestyle.
At least for us. We both are pretty energetic people. So for me, I felt like I was being put in a little box, and I was like, I need to leave.
Yeah.
So was there a breaking point which kind of made you go, this is not what we signed up for, this is not where we want to be, or like we need to...
Or this is exactly what we signed up for, and it turns out we hate it.
Yes.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, well, I'll take this one.
Okay, go back.
It turns out that we're not great employees. Well, let me rephrase.
Neither am I. I'm not great. yeah, me either.
Steph is a great employee, but bad in the way that she'll bend over backwards to make her boss proud and happy. Meanwhile, she's secretly crying in the corner. And I'm a
different kind of bad employee. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it, where I want to do it.
So
I'll deliver, but I don't want to be told when, where, or how.
I want to give you a hug right now, Sandy.
Yeah.
Because that's me. It turns out to be, I'm really combative. I don't really want to be told when and where to do something. I just want to do my job. I will do it well. I'll do it to completion. But like, don't call yourself my boss. Like, I don't like that. So we realized that. And after, my gosh, like 50 different one-on-ones with my boss, I was like, okay, I think the corporate lifestyle and climbing up this corporate ladder is really just not cohesive with my goals. And it's amazing that I was able to find that out. So for me, that's what happened. And for Steph, I think she had always been itching to live a digital nomad lifestyle. She was just doing me the service of really seeing this lifestyle through. But after I started having troubles at work, I started talking to Steph about it, and she really jumped at the opportunity, I think, to go, well, I don't think you have to do that, Dalt. I think we can just either move to Hawaii. And it had nothing to do with that Hawaiian hunk, by the way.
No ulterior motive there.
No.
Maybe you would become the Hawaiian hunk in Hawaii.
Exactly.
But that's when Steph kind of brought up moving out of the country. And that really resonated with me because I was like, okay, I lived the actor lifestyle. Now I've lived the corporate lifestyle. What's next? And through those processes, I figured out what are my goals and what's important in my life. And it turns out that Steph and I have really similar goals and wants and needs as it relates to the life that we want to build for ourselves. So it just was perfect. And we were able to really close these doors without feeling like we would ever look back and go, I don't know if we made the right decision, because we took years to experience these things. And I think that was good. I wouldn't have changed anything.
No, I wouldn't have changed it for the world. It makes this time so much more meaningful now that we are living abroad and living a more digital nomad lifestyle.
Yeah.
It makes it feel even more freeing now that we've come from this little box and we've like broken out of it. Yeah, it feels really good.
So was there a bit of a process that you went through to try and unpack your goals and then get aligned on where you were heading together?
Lots of couch conversations.
Yeah.
And lots of long walks. That was something that was really important to us when we lived in Oregon in this house, and I felt very trapped and bored. We would go on these really long walks together where we would leave our phones at home. We had no agenda, no time frame. We would just walk. And every single time we would have these like beautiful, really deep conversations about what we wanted to do with our lives, where we both wanted to go next, both professionally, personally, romantically, all of the above. And we would come back home and then sit on the couch and continue the conversation. And it always just led to a deeper understanding of ourselves and of each other.
Yeah, it was cool because I remember this one moment where Steph and I were super intentional about doing that thing where we sometimes would be watching Netflix or something like that. And we would look at each other and go, man, I feel like this is such a passive activity and it's like not getting us anywhere closer together. And sometimes you totally need to zen out and watch a show. But we were doing that a lot. And we turned off Netflix one day and we were like, let's go for a walk. And we started walking. And all of a sudden I asked Steph, and this was about 3.5 years into our relationship, I was like, what are your goals? Like, who are you? Because I realized that I hadn't really asked Steph that question since our second date at a coffee shop. And I felt like I had already known that because I asked it 3.5 years ago. Why would I need to ask that again? I already know this girl so well. But it was just a wake-up call for me because I was like, oh my gosh, it's so important to continuously check in with your partner because as they grow and develop, so don't their goals and their mindsets. And it was just like, wow, I feel like I'm relearning you all over again. And it was really romantic in a sense. And it felt like we were redating after we started to get really intentional about these more meaningful and deep questions.
I agree. I remember that.
So you obviously, there was a couch conversation and you were like, oh my gosh, what if we didn't live in the States anymore? Actually, what if we didn't live anywhere and we just were nomadic? There's obviously a big process between that first initial couch conversation and packing up a house, selling a house, or reorientating your careers, the logistics, visas, finances, insurance, all of the things. How long did that take from like initial idea to decision to you're now living in Chiang Mai, Thailand?
Not actually that long.
I want to say like 6 months or less. I will admit, I had been planting the seed since the first day I met this guy. It was always part of my...
Just slowly chipping away.
Oh, yes.
No joke.
Yes, literally since the very first date, I remember telling him on our first date, like, one day I'm going to live abroad and I'm going to be nomadic. And I think at the time he thought I was crazy. Like, okay, yeah, it's a great little pipe dream you have. But I just would continue planting the seeds every time it got brought up. Every time I saw a successful digital nomad or business owner living abroad, I would just share the story with Dalton and try to show him how cool that lifestyle would be. But then it really did take, like he said, us trying out the corporate thing. Well, specifically him trying out the corporate thing. I think for him to understand, like, yeah, I don't want this. Now let me kind of relook at what you're talking about. So from the point of Dalton realizing he wanted to quit his job to us actually moving to Thailand, I would say it was about 6 months. And it happened very, very quickly because I was working part-time and I was like, this is my dream come true. So all of my energy just went straight to like planning.
Making it happen
Before he could change his mind. So yeah, I jumped on it. Yeah, immediately I was like, okay, first we need to find renters for our house because we don't want to sell our first house because for us it is a really special place. The house is not necessarily where it's located, but the house itself has a really special place in our heart. And we spent a lot of time making it a really cute little home. So we wanted to rent out our house. Then we had to figure out where we were going, which again, I kind of already knew Thailand was like our first stop. It was just a matter of convincing him why that was a good idea. And then we had to figure out the visa situation, which did take a lot of headache. but we figured it out.
But I do think the reason why it was so fast too is because even though it was the thing we wanted to do, we almost felt like it was the only thing that we could do.
We had no backup plan.
No, we even looked at every state.
All in.
Yeah, like every state in the US, and we were like, we literally went down every single state and we go, would we move here? And there was no state that we felt called to at all.
Except for Hawaii, but he wasn't, so that wasn't a thing.
Yeah, no, I don't want to pay $1 million to be on a rock with your ex-lover. So
eye roll.
So yeah, it was perfect, especially because we wanted to start doing what we wanted to do and build something together, our podcast and all of these different ideas that we had. And obviously, Steph thinks Chiang Mai is amazing. I think she was a Thai princess in her past life, which is why she feels so called. But like, it was also a really budget-friendly place that allows us to stretch our savings as far as possible. So everything really aligned, and Thailand is amazing. It's amazing.
I'm with you, Steph. When Nathan and I visited Chiang Mai, I reckon I said about 10 times a day, like, so how long do you reckon it would take us to move here? Imagine if we lived here. We could live like right there. Imagine if this was our local cafe.
Yeah.
And the cycling culture, like everybody cycles there. I love it. So
my
good.
God.
It's so true.
Come here, we'll be besties, and
we'll hang out.
I do know you like to tinker with bicycles, man. I do know that.
I do.
There's a lot of bikes.
There's a lot of bikes.
I could start up a bike repair shop.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
be
saying.
killing it.
My man.
Absolutely.
Come to Thailand. Let's get 70-cent coffees together.
Yeah.
So tell us, so far, it's still fresh. Is it living up to your expectations? Is it what you thought you were signing up for? Much like corporate life, loved it for the first 6 months, then it raised some question marks. You're in the first 6 months. How's it going?
It's definitely living up to the expectations, specifically because we did close off these doors. I think, as you two very much know, like, starting your own business and building your own things and working on your own projects and going all in is a terrifying experience, and one that makes you question yourself on a daily basis. Like, I'm not seeing the growth I want. Is this really what I should be doing? Like, in a year from now, am I going to see the payoff? So it's a really frightening experience. But having done those two lifestyles, I know that this is what we should be doing and that there's nothing else I want to go back to. And so with that, I feel like it's definitely made us a much stronger and fulfilled couple specifically. So I wouldn't change anything. It's amazing.
That makes me so happy to hear because I love it. I'm like living out my childhood dreams right now. We're just prancing around, going to all the cute coffee shops and meeting the super friendly local people and eating delicious, really affordable Thai food every day and riding on the little motorbike. Like, I really feel like I'm living my fantasies. So I'm happy that you love it as much as I do.
Oh,
thank goodness.
Yeah.
So tell me, so now that you're living a little bit more, I guess, like intentionally, like, did you wrap some time frames around this, or are you like, it is what it is while it serves us?
That's how we started, I think. Right? I think that's how we started. We didn't really have much of a plan really going in. We were like, okay, based on our visas, we'll see how much time we can spend here, and then maybe we'll go to Vietnam or whatever. And the wondrous thing about travel and throwing yourself out there is that these opportunities just start popping up like just everywhere. And you start making these connections and meeting these people, and they start talking about what they're doing, and they invite you to be a part of it. And it's really incredible. And you don't really, in my experience, get those opportunities when you are in this place of stagnation and so caught up in your routine that you have your blinders on and you're not even able to see those opportunities maybe. So that started happening almost immediately when we moved here. And now, just yesterday, we signed a 6-month lease. And now we're thinking about even staying another 6 months after that because of all the things that would require us to be here for 12 months. So yeah, I think we really solidified a plan as we worked through this last month.
Mm-hmm. But it's It's changing every day because even though we're planning on staying here for 6 months, like where we're going as far as like our podcast or any business ventures, that is changing every day as we just meet new people and create these different connections and have ideas. So it's exciting. It's ever changing, ever growing. And that's really our only goal, is like to continue growing, whatever that means. And so far, we've been successful with that.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I honestly think that travel has really opened our eyes, because one thing that Steph and I identified when we were living together is that we did fall into that routine of, like I said, Monday through Friday, go to work, go to the gym, et cetera, et cetera. And it was so comfortable and so easy, repetitive, and predictable. And for a lot of people, that's what they want. And that's great. But for us, what we realized about our relationship is that something that's pivotal is discovering a sense of newness and being in like that state of childlike wonder, where you look at a child walking around and they're just like, whoa, what's that?
That's us every day.
And it's so cool because, like, needless to say, you don't need to move out of the country to do that. But if you do decide it, we highly recommend it, you do find yourself in that state every single minute of every single day. Everything is so brand new. So we did rediscover that state of wonder, and that was important.
Yeah, I think something that you touched on there, which is so important to know, is what your like certainty and variety type needs are. Because like you said, some people are so content and really thrive knowing exactly what their, next month, quarter, year, 5 years looks like. And other people are like, oh my God, if I looked down the barrel and I knew exactly what was going to happen, that would freak me out. Like, yeah. So I think really understanding and getting to know your own certainty needs, your own variety needs, how much growth you're really seeking and your sense of contribution, all of those kinds of things. And then understanding as a couple, like what are those shared needs as well? Because that's some of what you've just described of like not really knowing, oh, we might do this for a year, we might not, like that would scare the shit out of some other people. Yeah. And I think it's so much of the conversation that we're having on the Date Forever podcast is about like designing it for you and designing a life and a relationship that is exciting for you. And it doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to look the way that your parents did it, your friends are doing it, or that society's doing it, or that the shows on Netflix are showing it. Like you really can choose it for yourself. So thank you so much for sharing a little bit about how you're like living life by design and design for the two of you. So you talked a little bit about keeping your relationship fueled up with couch conversations. But what I'd love to know is like, what are some of the other practices or habits or rituals that you've got to keep your relationship fueled up, particularly now that you've probably unearthed some of your rituals and you're building new ones?
That's a beautiful question. And I think I have 2 points I want to make here. The first is something we've touched on a little bit, which is and Dalton just mentioned, we both thrive in that place of newness. So we have that going for us all day, every day right now with living in Chiang Mai for the first time. So that is like fully taken care of just by nature, by living here. But the thing that we've just been trying to reincorporate since being here is having that separate time of like peace to ourselves. And this first month that we've been in Chiang Mai, we've been in a really small studio apartment. You can see all 4 walls right now on this call. This is where we are. So it's very small. And our house was a 3-story house. So it was a big switch. And we've both talked recently about how important it is for us to both have that downtime away from each other, where we just get to shut off our brains, not be talking to each other, and have that like reset time. And for Dalton, that is a bubble bath. And for me, that is outside like meditation or yoga on the porch, where I get to shut the doors and I'm like, Dalton, please do not bother me for 15 to 20 minutes. And it's been so important for the health of our relationship and our own mental health.
Yeah, but we forgot about the importance of that for a while, because there was a 2.5 month string of time where we were in our Oregon house and we decided to move out, and we had to spend a month and a half with our parents. And
back in Arizona,
our parents work from home too. So we never were alone. And then we moved to Thailand in a 200 square foot room. you can't get away from each other. And that was great in its own way. But I had this experience last week where I all of a sudden started crying at a Chiang Mai food market because it was nuts, guys. Like, Steph is getting a 2-hour massage. And I was like, I'm not really in the mood for that. And she's like, well, what are you going to do for 2 hours by yourself in Asia? And I was like, I'm going to walk. So I just started walking back and forth in this market. And this market is huge. It takes like 30 minutes to get from point A to point B. And consolidating this other really long story, what happened was I just started to focus on all the people instead of the merchandise. And something clicked in my head where I started connecting with these people on such a genuine and raw level that at first I was like struck with sorrow because I was seeing all of the hardships and trauma that these people likely experienced at one point in their life. And then all of a sudden I was like saturated with joy because I realized that despite those hardships, a lot of them fully healed from those difficulties and are experiencing joy and happiness right now. So like that was a whole process that took an hour and a half. And all of a sudden I just started like tearing up and crying.
And Dalton doesn't really cry. That's my job in this relationship.
It was so odd. But my point was, and what I walked away from that experience with, I was like, oh my God, I don't think I could have had that experience if Steph was right next to me, because I'm so in tune with Steph and making sure she's comfortable and making sure that she's okay that I almost naturally fall into this closed off box where I'm in tune with her and less in tune with other people. So I just went to her afterwards and she was like, how was your walk, babe? And she's like, why are your eyes red?
Like, what happened? I only left you alone for 2 hours.
I was attacked.
Like, what's going on?
But then we went to dinner after and I was like, hey, I think we should incorporate a day every week where we just branch off and really do our own thing. And we were reminded of that just last week. So that's a big ritual for us now.
Yes. Yeah. Starting this week.
It is so easy to fall into almost that codependent bubble of like the two of you, and especially when you are somewhere new, you're like, oh, I don't want you to miss out on this thing that I want to go do as well. But also, if you're always together all the time, like, yes, you can kind of debrief on something, but you can't bring anything new back to the relationship and be like, oh, I found this amazing thing, let's go do this, or like,
exactly. Yeah.
So, and also while you're traveling, that you don't have your individual social networks. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to go and have coffee with my friend or whatever. So all of your new social connections you're making together. So I think it's really important that you've shared that, because I mean, the longest Nath and I have traveled together was maybe like 3 months.
Yeah.
And Nath left me in Madrid airport and I flew to Indonesia and I cried my eyes out for like, I don't know, like 12, 15 hours. Like I was like,
because we just hadn't been separated.
I hadn't
like
been alone for, and that's like not a good place to be. I mean, there was lots of stuff behind all of that emotion, but yeah, it was like, holy shit, I've been with my person 24/7 for 3-4 months and now he's just like gone. Like, yeah, so good on you for picking that up a lot sooner than we did.
It's like variety is so important because we often say this, it's like our term where joy is the product of a shared experience. And so I feel like we really fell into that mindset like pretty hardcore.
Oh, it also is a product of your own personal experience too.
Yeah. Maintaining that sense of independence and like something that resonated too. We were listening to one of your episodes again, and I can't remember, someone else that you interviewed said, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. You have 2 flashlights. One person is holding a flashlight, the other's holding the other, and the beams of light do cross. So there is this interconnectiveness, but at the same time, they're not one spotlight, right? It is 2 flashlights.
I was like,
whoa.
Yeah. Miranda Claire said that, the soulmate coach, and she's amazing. And I think that's one of the most like pivotal analogies that I've heard. And, you can see it, like how important it is to have your own beam of light. lighting up your path, and that if, somebody else's was to disappear for whatever reason, that you would still have light in your life. And I think that's so important. And it's so great that I'm stoked that you learned that and that it stuck with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit about your journey and your experience and what you're up to at the moment. But to say thank you, we've given a year's worth of seeds to a family in Malawi, so that they can grow some food and nourishment, not just today, but for the next year or so. So thank you so much for making that possible.
Oh, thank you guys. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. That is incredible.
No worries. So, Steph and Dalt, if people want to connect with you or learn a little bit more about your journey or...
Your show?
Yeah, that's it. How can they do that?
Yeah, so we are on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Our show is called Life with Steph and Dalt. And then we're also on Instagram at Life with Steph and Dalt.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we appreciate you guys so much. This was fun. This was so much fun.
Yeah, so fun. And we will take you up on those dollar beers in Chiang Mai sometime soon.
Please
Hopefully
do.
in the next 12 months.
We would love that.
Yeah, please do.
We
Oh my
need
gosh.
friends.
We would love to finally share the knowledge that we've acquired of this cafe is great. Don't go to this one, et cetera, with people who are actually with us. So, yeah, come on down.
Awesome. Thanks,
Sounds
team.
amazing.
Thank you guys.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.